Yeah, as he said, I'm Ricky Mason. It gives me great pleasure as a startup founder to be here in this room, just to see our ecosystem in Kentucky growing. And not only to talk to Robert today and talk about not only how our ecosystem is growing, but how we're funding these growing companies here in Louisville and the programs that we have to do that. So without further ado, let me introduce the president of Commonwealth Seed Capital, Mr. Robert LaMothe.
Thank you, thank you. Everybody hear me?
Robert, we'll start off with this. For those who may not know, just give us a quick background. I know your role is newer in this world. Give us a quick background of you and some of the things you're doing at Commonwealth Seed Capital.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Greetings and thanks for having me. Yes, really excited to be here, really excited to share the Commonwealth Seed Capital story. As Chris mentioned, I'm newly a part of this story, and really we're trying to write this next chapter. Excited to be in the role that I am, humbled. I've been a long time financier, so I've worked in banking for many years. Started in investment banking, did SBA lending, was in banking for a long time, and then did business consulting. My most recent role was with the Minority Business Accelerator at the Cincinnati Chamber, which I did advocacy and consulting with the 40 largest minority businesses in the region. So have a tremendous appreciation, respect for entrepreneurs, and my story has always been bringing financing in support of their dreams, and really will continue that work under CSC. CSC provides a tremendous umbrella to do that work in the state of Kentucky. For those who might be unfamiliar with what it is, CSC originated in the Kentucky cabinet, roughly 20 years ago, and then was spun out as a single member LLC, so we're a private company. We were seeded with $25 million in funding from the state, of which we're an evergreen fund, so we pour money into investments, and then upon outcome and distributions, we get our return, and then we repeat that cycle. So, and to be able to sustain that for 20 years is admirable. I don't know, it might be lost on some, but the fact that same money has generated enough return to support our operations and then continually fund businesses generation after generation is pretty remarkable, and glad to be a part of that story. We've got a bunch of innovative things that we'd like to do. Some of it is going back to our roots, but primarily we're doing direct investment in Kentucky-based companies and Kentucky-originated funds.
So, Robert, coming from your background in banking to kind of startup and investment, can you talk a little bit about the similarities and differences in funding a startup coming from a banking standpoint to going from to an investment?
Yep. Yeah, great question. I think there's always this question about, conventional financing, which is your banking and those sorts of funding opportunities. There's a tremendous amount of similarities, and the biggest similarity is the founders. So it's all about people. So even if you're in banking, that's where you start and end. The conversation ends with the character and the passion of the individuals behind the business. So that doesn't change. That is pretty much consistent across all financing platforms. What's unique about the venture space is it's hard to get your mind around founders. I mean, they are just tremendous, and haven't seen this kind of passion within a certain entrepreneurial group, and it's exciting. It's invigorating for us. But yeah, the similarities are, you have individuals who are pursuing a business initiative and a business dream, and it's just where they're at in the stage of their business at that point.
Selfishly, thinking about access to capital, and one of the topics that Rick and I talked about last year was not only access to capital, but access to capital for Black and brown founders. And look at the numbers prior to COVID and then COVID and how that kind of dropped back in 2022. Look at the state of Kentucky. How are you looking at access to capital here, maybe from early stage perspective and some of the work you're all doing, but also to maybe emerging managers throughout the state?
Yeah, great question. When we originally were stood up in the cabinet and then spun out, we solely invested in funds. So we didn't do a direct investment. We were looking for individuals who had a network and a pipeline of investments that they were going to invest in, and then we invested in their vision. Some of our work is going to move back to that because we want to stand up emerging fund managers in the state. We know we can't have, our pipeline is a little bit further upstream, but there's a need for capital across the continuum, all of which we can't meet, but we could support some of that. Having a 20-year track record in Kentucky, we've got a lot of learned experiences that we could share with emerging managers. Those managers would go out, set up their fund, and then their network and their pipeline, the companies that they reach are going to be far more vast than what we could do individually, and we know that. And I guess it has to be said that we want to be intentional about having diversity in those new funds that get stood up in the state. So we know that by doing that, being intentional about that our pipeline will reflect more of a diverse founder population just by virtue of doing that. So,
have you seen any examples of other communities or other programs that are doing a great job of getting diverse founders into programs, but also getting them funding and helping them prepare for funding? And what are some of your ideas for helping those fund managers be prepared to manage those funds, and then those founders be prepared to take in those funds?
Yeah, great question. We have an example even as close to Cincinnati. The Minority Business Accelerator has recently stood up a fund, and I was part of that before I joined CSC, and that work was reaching out to fund the funds around the country, living cities and others who are actively looking for these type of investments. So they've pooled money, they want to invest in diverse founder funds. So a lot of it is coordination. Both sides of the equation are out there. So there's money seeking these funds, and now we're just trying to identify individuals who will, want to put themselves out there, stand up, create these funds, and then we feel confident that we can support some of that both administratively and through LP commitment, but we also feel confident that we can attract money from around the country to flow into those funds.
I like that. I love the piece of attracting more capital into the ecosystem and supporting the funds upstream. For you all specifically, you're talking about being more upstream, not the early stage. What are some of the things that you're looking for companies, and what stage are you looking at? Are you looking at lead deals, or how are you looking at your core investor pipeline?
Yeah, great question. We haven't historically led deals. That's not to say that that's not in our future. And moving upstream has a lot to do with the influx of dollars that are coming from SSBCI, which is some federal dollars that are coming to all states. If you think about our landscape pre-SSBCI, we may have had $10 million collectively amongst all the funds. That's including Keyhorse, us, and then the private funds. SSBCI in itself will provide over 10 million. So we'll have 10 million on top of what we have historically had. So that pushes up the continuum just a bit. But we'll always be plugged into the network, the pipeline. So as deals get funded through Keyhorse or other funds within the state, we're always going to be that next level funder. And there'll be connectivity to the founders at an earlier stage so that we'll have transparency. They'll have access to us as they're starting to build towards whatever their next round looks like. So,
and Robert, could you expand a little bit on SSBCI for folks that might not be familiar with what that is?
Wow, yeah. So I wish my colleague or Monique was here, but so each state was allocated a certain amount of funds, and those funds, this is what they call 2.0. This was done maybe in 2013. A lot of it was used, prior rounds were used for loan collateral for banks. This iteration puts it out there, and they want to be intentional about putting money into the VC space. And so Monique Kirkendall-Quarterman has done a monumental job in winning this award, which was awarded in February. So now we're just kind of working through the details. But there's a large percentage that will be direct investment, and then they'll do some fund-to-fund as well. So they'll support these emerging funds that stand up in Kentucky. So still a lot to be worked out, but we've won the war, so we've got the money. We're just figuring out how to best allocate it over a 10-year period. So,
and I think that was 117 million. Yeah, 117 million. So 10 million a year to put into our ecosystem, which is like awesome.
Right.
Like I'm really excited about it just because of the opportunities that it will offer. Startup founders, but also fund managers. We know, looking at the research, that we typically invest in people that we know are people that are like us that we can relate to. And with the shortage in investment in Black businesses and diverse businesses, we know that that's a direct correlation to the lack of fund managers that are diverse. So
right.
I think that these SSBCI funds will definitely, help in that effort and help get some of these dollars out to, Black and brown businesses.
Great. Yeah.
All right, I know it's early in your tenure, Robert, but Rick and I are always talking about the state of Kentucky, right, and different ecosystems throughout the state. Right now, what are some opportunities you've seen throughout the state, or some correlation between different startup ecosystems throughout the state, and how can we better start working together in different communities?
Yeah, when I stepped into the role, I was just blown away with KY innovation. The innovation hubs. That's something. Haven't even worked in Ohio that doesn't exist. So there's already a natural network of technical assistance and just on the ground teams throughout the state. And so that's something that you really can network as you're trying to attract capital to the state. That's unique to Kentucky. And so to be able to present that to potential funders, LPs who want to come into the state, we already tell them we've already got a grassroots network that spans the entire state. So if there's interest in any part of the state, we can easily activate those conversations and get them in touch with folks immediately in those areas. And so we'll leverage that as we go out and attract LP dollars from out of the state. That's one of the things we'll leverage, is this network of innovation hubs, along with a 20-year track record of doing venture capital in the state of Kentucky. So I think that's a powerful argument for us to make to attract outside capital.
I guess coming into the Kentucky ecosystem, I got to ask, what do you think is our purple cow in the Kentucky ecosystem? Like, what's our special sauce? What do we have? What's unique that we can bring to the market?
Yeah, I think I've shared this with some in the room, and we've kind of talked about this, is that there is this unique opportunity for Kentucky to move as an entire state. So if you think about different states, and I'll take Ohio as an example, they're kind of cut in thirds. So you've got Cincinnati, you've got Columbus and Cleveland, and they all work in their own kind of ecosystems. And Kentucky, you really can deliver a message of a unified state product. So if you're going to LPs and saying if you could, in other states they may find just regions, I think we really can deliver an entire state as a product or a landscape canvas for them to invest in. So it's very unique. And obviously some of our attraction tools, bourbon and horses, we can get, that folks will respond to those kind of invitations and just come to visit. So there's some things that we could court with when we're trying to get investment from outside the state.
All right, we weren't going to keep this too long, but I want to make sure we have the opportunity to open up for any questions for those here, make an engagement, and see if there's any questions you have for Robert. Everyone's quiet tonight. All
All
right.
right.
All right.
You're welcome.
Oh,
Yeah, right. Robert, hey, Larry.
Hey, Larry.
Nice to see you.
That's good.
I know you talked a lot about some intentionality around supporting Black and brown founders. I think what we've seen across the state and country is the access for Black and brown founders to get introduced to you. The Kinetic Ventures has a great model with their AI platform. It allows them to have a much more diverse portfolio. Can you imagine something like that for CSC, or how do you think about that intake for you as you get to understand the founders that are in our state that you guys support?
Yeah, great question. And it's something that we're going to have to develop, right? And I think there are remnants within the state that already that network within these ecosystems, and so, but it's just bringing awareness and education inside of those networks, and it may develop that you have an umbrella organization that gets kind of a roll-up organization, but there are pockets of outreach and development within the minority space that you could access. But yeah, we'd have to be intentional to inject more education and more information into those spaces. But yeah, I think you start there.
I guess one more. What does it look like reaching out to Commonwealth Seed Capital for investment? Our upcoming fund manager? Or?
Yeah, we are actively, so our biggest pursuit is standing up emerging fund managers, supporting that. And so that we're kind of getting back to the work that we did 20 years ago. So we're trying to flex some muscles that we haven't used in a while. So I kind of say that we're looking for as much input as we're going to give output. So we really need those folks in the ecosystem that are inspired and wanting to do fund management to start dialogues. You'll have all my contact information, but I'll be around the state trying to canvass for those individuals who want to lead in those opportunities, and we'll try to do whatever we can to support those efforts. So.
Well, I think that closes us out. If we don't have any more questions, I want to say thank you all for coming out and joining us at Network and Chill Covington. And I hope you all follow us at Always Networking on all socials. And hope to see you again. Thanks, Robert.
Thanks for having me.